Welcome. We're going to learn more about one woman's adventure with a goal of improving awareness of mental health issues. So I'm Rita Friesen from Nipawin, and I am pleased to be speaking with Lynne Harley, basically from Camrose at this point.
Yes, that's right. Great. Nice to meet you, Rita.
So I'm going to ask you, first of all, Lynne, what prompted this adventure?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess it was this particular biking adventure, but it's morphed into more than that because I'm raising awareness for jack.org, and I'm also promoting a book that I've written called What If You Could. It's a children's story, and it is going to be for sale on July 19th, so I'm excited about that. But I had joined the Millet Cycling Club when I moved to Camrose in terms of meeting, some new people, and then with COVID there was nothing happening. So this past May I went on my first cycle and we drove out to Bentley, Alberta. I didn't really even know about these places because I've lived a pretty small life for the last few years, and I met a group of people, and in this group there was two women who've done some tour riding. And so one girl went across Canada 2 summers ago, and then last year with COVID she did what she called the Covet Alberta tour. So she drew a heart in the province of Alberta, so she was touching the corners of the province, and she did that through the whole summer last year. And when I talked to them, I was just really excited, I think, by the experiences that they shared, sort of the adventure of living into this. And there was a part of me that thought this would be amazing. And as I shared what I'd been doing up until then, I was a life coach and I'd written this book. This one woman, Susan, said to me, well, you could call this your What If You Could tour. And that's the name of my children's story. And I thought, yeah, well, what if I could? I mean, I've never done anything like this. So that birthed the idea, and I had already spoken to the founders of jack.org. So it's an organization, a charitable organization that supports youth across Canada, and they're really working hard to dissolve the barriers around mental health. So they lost their son, Jack, this couple, in 2010. He committed suicide when he was in his first year of university at Queen's, and they said they had no idea he was struggling. And for whatever reason, he never felt like he could talk about it. And when this happened, they really, leaned into the fact that they wanted to change this for other youth. They wanted to somehow, how can we have these conversations where youth can come forward and say, hey, I am struggling and I need support. Right. So that's what birthed jack.org. And in the fall, I've got a brother who struggled his whole life with mental illness. And it really wasn't talked about. I mean, he died when he was 58 years old. So when he was growing up, there was, it was you either had an addiction, you were an alcoholic, or you were a drug addict, but there was no discussion about mental illness or how to support people going through times like that. And my brother died 5 years ago, and they couldn't even actually determine his death because he was found dead. But he had attempted prior to that a couple of times. And so when I wrote my book and thought about my brother, I looked into organizations in Canada thinking that I would like to donate a portion of my book in sort of memory and honor of my brother's life. And I as I Googled charitable organizations in Canada, I really fell in love with this one because it felt very proactive. They've all their work is evidence-based. They say 70% of mental illness, comes up in childhood or adolescence. Yes. And so they're working really, they're mentoring youth, again, evidence-based. They're supporting youth, they're mentoring them, they're empowering them so that it's, these empowered and informed youth that can go into schools and have the conversations with other students. And they do Jack Talks, so even the high school in Nipawin, for example, could invite a Jack Talk into their school, and this would be 2 post-secondary students who've maybe had their own struggles, and they're coming in now and they're sharing and they're really opening up the communication so other people can talk about it. And then, the school here could decide that they want a Jack chapter. But again, they're really trying to have it youth driven. So Right. It'd be the youth who would say, yeah, let's do this. And then they would get support from jack.org.
And I imagine that as soon as you mention the cause that is so dear to your heart, everybody's got a story.
Everybody does have a story. And I'm noticing, I was just saying today, I stopped at the Dairy Queen, just to
Right.
have a refreshment because it was a hot day. And I talked to 3 different couples, and one, when I told people what I'm doing, and maybe because I'm open about the fact that my brother struggled and this is what I'm doing, one man shared that, yeah, I struggle too, he said, so he was very open about it. And there's always a story. I was in Russell, Manitoba, and the manager gave me a hotel room for half price when he heard what I was doing, and that night there was a memorial in the hotel for somebody who had committed suicide. And I'm just hearing stories as I move forward. I've talked to youth, in Foam Lake. I stayed with a family in Shoal Lake, and I'm learning, how young kids' mental health is impacted. So I stayed with a woman who's a teacher, and her 14-year-old son, she said a couple weeks ago, was crying at bedtime. And she said, like, what's going on? And he didn't want to share. And she said, look, I'm not leaving until you tell me. And he told her that he was in a gaming community online, and some of the members were from the States. And he had just heard that another 14-year-old boy and his girlfriend had committed suicide. So this was his community.
Right.
He hasn't met them in person, but this is his virtual community. And now here he is, 14 years old, and he's trying to process that he's lost these 2 friends, to suicide. And so I just think there's the technology has brought in a whole different dimension to life. And when I was in Foam Lake talking to the high school, the principal said, it's not so much that there's overt bullying anymore, but so much is underground. There's the cyberbullying,
Right.
and, social media. When I was talking to the kids in the high school that day, I said, I know just from my point of view, I can go online and read, Facebook posts, and people are posting the best of the best. And, if you're not having a good day, it's easy to kind of think, well, boy, my life, isn't
Sucks.
very good. It sucks. Yeah, look at everybody's having a good life but me.
Right.
And I said, do you guys, have that feeling too? Or you hear that somebody's had a party and it's all over social media and you weren't invited? And there was a lot of head nodding. So I was just really kind of trying to tap into what these kids are experiencing.
And truthfully, in these last 2.5 years, the online families have become so significant.
I know.
And it is gamers, but it is
Mhm.
other groups that have
Mhm.
formulated and draw their support.
Absolutely.
So our world isn't just our neighbors physically anymore.
No.
It's so
Yeah.
much wider.
Yeah.
And I think we're so much more aware of the heartache out there.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is too, because of media, when something bad happens, we hear about it. Even for me personally, I probably shouldn't even say this publicly, but I just feel like all the media around COVID is very negative, and it was very fear-inducing, which really is lowering people's immune systems when you're living in fear and you're afraid of, the germs and what's going to happen and you're going to die. And for me personally, I seldom listen to the news because, there's times I do need to know what's going on, but I'm very selective, I guess, about what I choose to listen to.
I think it's quite interesting that rather than listening to the news, you just make the news.
Well, yeah. Or I just go make the
Isn't
news.
that better?
And it's mostly uplifting, I hope.
It's addressing a topic that we have had a very difficult time talking about.
Yeah. And it still is difficult. I still have people, in my circles who are dealing with family members and they don't want anybody to know about it. So, I'm not sure what the answer is or what it's going to take. But I know when I talked to the youth in Foam Lake, I just said, I think what we have to realize is that when we take the risk to be vulnerable, that really takes a lot of strength. And this is when we can get help. And I know at the end, I had some students come up and say that they really appreciated that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also a death in their school that October due to an accident. But again, it's the survivors that are left that need to know how to process and talk about what they're feeling. And so she said it was really good that you spoke today, and how much she thought that all the students needed to hear what I said, not just her.
Right.
So.
it's a number of years ago now, in the Nipawak Collegiate, beautiful young artist lady did die by suicide. And at that point I had a number of youth sharing my home, and they were in the same class, and the school counselor was going to tell the other students that it was a cutting that had gone wrong. And I said, I'm telling my group, my tribe, the truth. And he said, oh, you can't do that. And I said, I cannot lie to them. I can't let them think that it was a cutting gone wrong. It was despair. It was utter and total despair.
I know.
And hard conversations to have.
Well, hard conversations, and I think, I don't even think I knew sort of the extent of this until I started really doing my research and homework around jack.org, but sadly 25% of all youth deaths are attributed to suicide.
25%.
25%. And on Canada Day when I was riding, I really reflected on that, and that day I didn't post about what I'd seen and who I'd talked about. I talked about the fact that this is our country. This is our future. I mean, in 30 years, I'm not going to be here. But in 30 years, like, how many youth are going to be our future leading this country who have mental wellness and resilience?
And what all have we lost in the fields of the arts and the musics and the sciences by the loss of these beautiful young lives, right?
Absolutely. And often it is kids who you hear, like my brother was so intelligent,
right?
And I just think, when he was doing well, he was just the most articulate, well-spoken, sensitive, interested. One of the things my kids remember about him is how Uncle Craig would just be so interested in what they were doing, and so, encouraging and proud of them. And so, there's definitely a big hole in those of us that get left behind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how long are you going to be gone on this stage of this journey?
Well, I'm sort of at a point where I have to make some big decisions for a couple of reasons. So I haven't talked about this publicly, but my doctor, because of an issue I have with my heart, was not a fan of me doing this. And so when I set out, I said to him I was going to listen to my body. If it got to the point where I would have to increase medication because I was having more symptoms, I would absolutely stop. And up until now, I've been very careful about the length of my days and having rest days. And I think too, I got to very quickly in the first few days the realization that this was my tour, and if I was going to do a 30-kilometer day, that was good enough. I didn't have to do 100-kilometer days. Although I'm kind of tied into a few Facebook groups that do this touring, and the people who are serious about it are doing days that are 100K. And so I think, again, I didn't really have any context for what I was getting into, but I know that the closer I get to Winnipeg and I look at that whole Lake Superior loop, I'm really coming to what's the word I want to say? I'm reconciling myself to the fact that I think it would be very unwise for me to even attempt it. Not just because there's supposed to be very, very difficult hills, but first of all, I haven't even got into the heat of the day. And there was a young girl who just posted her trip from Kenora to Thunder Bay, and she's in her she's in her late 20s, possibly her early 30s, and she said, she just wrote this yesterday, this is definitely a mental game. There's very few communities, and if there are, there's just 1 or 2 houses, maybe a trailer. She says, I'm traveling with extra water because there's big gaps between places. And I just thought, I can't, that's what my doctor said. If something happens to you and you're out of self-service, or you're even in a community that's not aware of the medications, some of the older communities, they don't even know the medication you're on. So what I'm thinking is, and this is something I coach, and this is what was coming up for me today when I was cycling, often, we think it has to be an either or. So I was thinking, well, do I just quit in Winnipeg? And I coach people to say it can be a yes and. So what I'm going to check into when I get to Winnipeg is renting a vehicle, actually, that I can put my bike in, and riding myself from Winnipeg to Sudbury,
Right.
and then getting back on my bike and going south and cycling through Ontario, which I think would be similar to what I'm doing here. And so when I started this trip, I was going to ride until September 6th because I'm actually on my way to Quebec to a community or a lake called Lac La Haye. And my oldest son, Jordan, and his partner, Sabrina, are getting married there. She's from Quebec, and I'm officiating the wedding.
Oh.
So
I think you need to be there.
I need to be there. I need to be there. So, you know, when I was in Minnedosa talking to friends this morning, it was like, well, do I just quit in Winnipeg and go home? I'm planning to be in Winnipeg this week, and I want to do some visiting. I've got cousins there. And my brother is actually, my mom and my brother are buried in St. Pierre, Manitoba.
Oh, nice.
And I have not yet been to the gravesite since they've had their headstones put in. So that's part of my plan when I get to Winnipeg, is spending time reconnecting with cousins and going up to the gravesite. And today when I got back on my bike, I sort of had this, well, it can be a yes and. It doesn't have to be,
No.
It's ending in Winnipeg. So, but I'm at the point where I know that I would be really putting my own health, I think, in danger to do that ride. And so if I can get a car and proceed with this plan, then I'll happily pick up in Ontario once I get beyond the big hills and the lack of services and communities, and then start cycling through southern Ontario. I want to go through the Georgia Bay. It sounds beautiful. There's ferry rides and things like that. And so that's my tentative plan as of this moment. So as long as I can get a car, I think I'm going to go with that plan. And it feels far more expansive, because I've been having anxiety about what do I do when I get to Winnipeg.
Sometimes when we just make up our mind, right? Or
Yeah.
open our mind to those other possibilities.
Well, and I think for me too, and this is a good lesson for me, and maybe this is a good lesson for everybody, is, we tend to be hardest on ourselves. And it's like, I've set the bar and this is what I want to do. And now I'm rethinking it, and there's this part of me is like, well, did I fail because I didn't do it, right? And I know I've had people say, well, look what you have done, and look at the awareness that you're creating. And I've got this book that's coming out in another week, and I'm promoting that because every book that sells, a portion of the sale will go to jack.org forever.
Yeah.
So I really hope the book does well. And I'm having a wonderful time actually in these smaller communities. Lots of people, are talking, they're excited, they want to get the book for grandkids, and it's a book to, my vision of this book is it's a book you would give to someone graduating from high school, somebody who's maybe coming out of in a transition, moving forward, moving out of their comfort zone. We're going to hear from those voices, and I've heard from them since I decided to do this tour, like, well, who are you to do this? Look at how old you are. How are you ever going to do this? You've never done this before. And then there's this other voice that's going, but what if you could? What if you could make a difference? What if you could, bring awareness to this organization? What if you could promote your book and it does really well? And, just really want to lean into that voice.
I don't think we're ever too old for what if you could.
No, and that's kind of what the book says.
Right.
We're going to be living into that as long as we live.
Yes.
And I think especially as we age, we really have to realize that our life isn't over. There's other things we can go on to. And when I look at, this young girl doing the tour the way she's doing it, like, kudos, yeah, this is amazing. But what if I could do it my way as somebody who's a senior citizen? And
for my 70th birthday, I went on a 14-day bike and barge tour of the Netherlands.
there you go. And that's my vision too. Is like, I think I don't have to be doing something for 3 months across Canada down the road.
No.
I can, I have actually that same dream to go over to Europe and do some of those trips. So good job. Good job, Rita.
It was fun.
Yeah.
So how long did it take to create that book? It must have been bubbling and bubbling.
I really do believe it was inspired. And
Okay.
I'll tell you a bit of a story about it, but I do a 3-month coaching program. One of the programs that I coach is called the Dream Builder Program. And I feel that this is sort of the template of what I coach is in this book. And it was like I could see the pictures, in one of the modules I teach, we talk about acting butterfly when you're still a caterpillar, this idea of living from a vision-based life. So this is what I coach, that sadly many people are sort of caught up in the conditions of their life And that keeps them stuck. They're looking very at the physical. We have our five senses. I can taste this, I can touch this is how much money's in my bank account, this is what the economy's telling me is possible. But what I coach is really quite spiritual, and it's about, we are this spiritual being having a human experience, and we have the faculties of imagination and will and reason and intuition, and these are the faculties that really connect us to living from a vision. So, and one of the things that we teach is that if it's something you can attain, it's not really a dream, it's a goal. And really dreaming is setting something that you're not sure how you're going to reach it. But there's something, and I really believe it, I'm just trying to think who says it. Is it Thoreau who says, when one advances confidently in the direction of their dreams, endeavoring to live a life that they'd love, all kinds of things start to happen. It's like the universe starts to conspire. And to me, this is that spiritual asset. It's sort of that aspect to living from a vision. And I just keep seeing this over and over. Like I'm writing now daily on Facebook and people are going, oh my gosh, this is so inspirational. And every day I'm just being met with kindness and angels. And, I set out in the morning and I have no idea where I'm going to end up or who I'm going to talk to. And just really sort of setting the intention to be open. So this book was bubbling up, and it's rhyming. Like, I think it's really brilliant, and I don't even want to take full credit for it because it's so beautiful.
But your name's going to be on the cover, right?
It is on the cover. But the day that I decided that I would write it, and again, when I'm coaching, I was thinking, okay, is this just a paradigm? I'm trying to build my coaching business, and I've got this book, and it's just another means of distracting and delaying myself from what I'm doing over here. And then I just it wouldn't leave me alone. So at night I started to write, and I just was having fun with it. I thought it's just flowing out of me. And so the day that I decided that, okay, I'm going to do this, because there was a voice that was like, well, who are you? You've never written a book, and who's going to read it, and how are you going to sell it? And the day that I said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And I went for a walk just through a green space by my house, and it's just got ball diamonds. There's no houses close by. And in the middle of nowhere on this walking path, I'm going to say something drew a caterpillar with chalk, a chalk drawing, and it was about the size of that countertop.
Oh, wow.
And it had 3 stars over its head. And there was not one other drawing. And I used to think when my kids had sidewalk chalk, there would just be like drawings all over the place. They wouldn't just do one thing. They would have all kinds of characters or whatever, right? And that's all there was. I've never seen a chalk drawing before, never seen one since. I've been in that neighborhood now for almost 3 years, and that's all that was there. And I took a picture of it because I thought, okay, wow, this feels like a sign.
Will you share a few lines from the book with us?
I could, but
you can cheat.
So one gray and rainy morning, a caterpillar, doing what caterpillars do, was eating on a big green leaf, munching, crunching, thinking too. Feeling bored and very full on this gray and gloomy day, the caterpillar heard from an inner voice that had quite a lot to say. Every day you wake up and there's nothing fun to do. You've been eating leaves for days now. It's time for something new. The caterpillar was big now and hanging upside down. He no longer had an appetite, so he looked up and all around. He saw squirrels chattering noisily, playing a game of hide and seek, and hungry baby robins gobbling worms from their mother's beak. White and yellow wildflowers swayed freely in the breeze, and a red-headed woodpecker tap-tapped on the bark of a tree. My life feels glum and dull as rain. My coat is dreary too. No fun, no color, nobody to play with. No wonder I'm feeling blue. Feeling longing and some discontent, the caterpillar sighed. I want more for this life of mine. Could I find it if I tried?
Thank you. It's gonna lead us to see what he is going to look for.
Yes, exactly.
But one of the things you said, Lynne, is that every day you were met with kindness and angels. What was the most surprising angel that visited you so far?
I don't even know if I can say one in particular. Like, I've had people who've wanted to buy my lunch. I've had people who've taken me home with them. So, and even the couple I stayed with in Foam Lake, it was their granddaughter in L'Orange that I knew, and similar to this stay, you know, I put it out to my readers, this is what I'm doing, this is my tentative route, and she set me up with her grandparents, and they were just amazing. I stayed 3 nights with them. I was interviewed by the newspaper. I spoke at the high school, and everybody knew everybody. The last night I was there was a big potluck supper for me. And now it's so funny because yesterday, almost daily, they send me a text and they'll say, "Where are you?" And yesterday she goes, "Okay, this is your new mom. Where are you today?" And I found the same too. When I went to Churchbridge, I met a couple, and I talked to him on the street because he was cycling, and he was on a road bike with the skinny tires, and he was wearing like the cycling shorts and stuff. And I got to meet him, and I was impressed. He was 89 years old, and he was out like on a little cycling tour. And I just left them, and I went to look for a camp spot. Their campground was a block away, and all of a sudden they were driving up behind me. I didn't know it. This white car rolled down the window, and they said, "Would you like to come and stay with us and have supper with us?" And I mean, the mosquitoes are awful. Being on a little sleeping mat compared to a bed is not super comfortable at my age. And they were just awesome. They were beautiful. And it turned out, even meeting them, Muriel had gone 22 kilometers on her bike that day. She was 84. But they took me downstairs, and they had won the World Masters in Sydney, Australia in 2009, and they were doing the cycling on the tracks. So I guess I'm just feeling like these are just, you know, people that you wouldn't know anything about. You just see a couple of elderly people. But I think that this is what is just really inspiring to me, is when I hear the stories and what people share about their lives and how rich their lives have been. And often we just kind of, I don't know, pass over that. And
everybody has a story.
Everybody has a story. And I think I wrote that almost the very first day, that when you're not in a hurry, everybody has a story to tell you. And I've had people, I know one day when I felt, and it's just interesting, whenever I just almost feel like, why am I doing this? And it was my second or third day on my bike. It was a really strong crosswind. I was really terrified of the semis coming by me. And I got off on a gas station, and I think it was at the turnoff at Watrous, and there was nothing else there. And I went into the store, and you know, why am I doing this? And I started again. There was only one woman and her partner in the store, and she was in her late 70s. And I told her what I was doing. She started telling me about all the losses in her life. And then at the end, she came and she pressed a $20 bill into my hand and said, this is for you. When I was in Theodore, I was talking to another man outside. He said to me, "Oh, is this an e-bike?" And I said, "I wish." And told him what I was doing. And he said, jokingly, yeah, we don't have any mental health in this community. And he pulled a $100 bill out of his wallet. So I've just been putting these donations into jack.org when people do hand them to me. So I guess that surprises me. I mean, first of all, they could just be handing them to me, and I could be just not doing anything with them. But that's not who I am. But again, I just feel that there's some kind of a trust or just this belief in what I'm doing and the ability to.
Well, you're speaking to their
generous.
spirit.
Yeah, that's what it feels
So
like.
for those that are interested, have you got a public Facebook that we can follow?
Well, I have a website.
A website?
Yeah, so it's just www.lynne, L-Y-N-N-E, Harley, H-A-R-L-E-Y. And yeah, I do have a Facebook page that people are just now sharing. I'm getting more and more followers, and I'm just Lynne Harley, and I'm from Camrose. So I'm posting publicly so anybody can follow me. And then I have a donor page specifically so people can purchase my book when it's available. And like I said, a portion of the book will go to jack.org. But if they want to so when I get $100 or $20, or people who just decide, and I encourage people to do this through the website because they'll get a receipt for income tax purposes. But my donor page is just jack.org with a slash, and then What If You Could Tour, no spaces, What If You Could Tour. And that'll take them directly to my donor page. And I've set a goal of raising, whether I'll make it or not, $100,000 for Jack.org. And I'm 4% of the way there so far. But
So I really, really thank you for being inspired to do this.
Thanks, Rita.
You are just simply igniting flames all the way behind you. So thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to.
And blessings on the rest of the journey.
I will take them.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
sharing what I'm doing with other people.
Wonderful. Thank you. I trust that we all identified with some of the stories. I trust that we're all going to be watching for the book when it comes out. Thank you again, Lynne.